This podcast is being recorded on Kaurna land. We honour and celebrate the strong cultural traditions of motherhood, family and connection to country.
How Motherhood Changed Me is brought to you by Harrison Macmillan, Australia's leading recruitment firm run by women who live by values that make their mothers proud.
No woman can say motherhood hasn't changed her, but every mother's story is different.
My baby started to finally smile and feed and sleep, and something had changed in me forever. I lost that belief in I can do anything, which was a pretty scary place for me, considering if the myth is true that I came out of the womb saying, come on, I'm here to do something, let's go. It was a very confronting moment in my life. And so being the journalist that I am, I was like, surely somebody else is feeling like this.
Yeah. This is How Motherhood Changed Me. Hi, I am Kerry Turner.
And I'm Jenna Yates, and welcome to our first official episode.
Very first one.
Yes, it is very exciting. We have recorded a little intro ep, so you can go listen to that if you'd like to learn a little bit more about us. But we have a guest today, Kez.
We do. It's so exciting.
Very exciting. So we did think it was important to start right at the beginning. What actually happens to a woman when she becomes a mother? There is a word that you may or may not have heard of before that encompasses it all. So that word is matrescence, and we are really honoured to have journalist, author and matrescence activist Amy Taylor-Kabbaz with us to unpack all of this. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited about this. Thank you for including me.
When we were talking about doing this podcast together, I spoke to Kerry about matrescence and I was like, oh my God, you know, this word, and Amy Taylor-Kabbaz, and she's like, whoa, hold on a minute, matrescence.
Yeah, I had this moment, I felt like I should know this word. So I kind of went along with it. I thought, no, I don't know this word. The more Jenna spoke to me, I'm like, I've never heard this in my life, and I wish I had. Yeah. It was fascinating.
I came across it. I think my son was definitely under a year old, my eldest son. And I want to say it was powerful because to have a word to describe what you have experienced, it is powerful. Why isn't matrescence more well known, Amy?
Oh, that is $1 million question. I don't know whether I want to jump straight in with the feminist rant or not, so I'm just trying to hold myself back here for a second. But I remember when I heard it, I had the same feeling. Yeah. And I went straight to my publisher. I was meant to write a completely different book at the time and said, oh my God, I found this word. And there's this woman in New York who's researching it. I have to go. And I was in New York within a couple of months talking to the phenomenal researcher at Columbia University. And I also organised an interview with a woman who runs the Motherhood Centre in New York. And I asked her the same question. I'm like, why is nobody talking about this? Why do we not know this? Why is nobody researching? And her answer was, if this had been happening to men, we would have buildings dedicated to it.
It's so true.
It is mind-blowing that something that is at the very core of our very existence, which is having a baby and continuing the next generation, has been so ignored and misunderstood for so long.
And it goes back to the 70s, doesn't it? It was first coined in the 70s, and here we are in 2024, and I'm only hearing about it a few months ago when we started talking about this podcast. I just don't understand it.
Yeah.
So the background is there was a phenomenal anthropologist in the 70s called Dana Raphael, and she was a fierce advocate for breastfeeding and mothers, and could really see in the 70s that things were going down a path she was worried about. She could see high interventions, dropping breastfeeding rates. This was when a lot of mothers were on antidepressants. It was really medicalized. She was really concerned about what was happening with mothers. So she went in and studied it in an anthropological way, which I think is what was so powerful about this. Because she's like, we've done something wrong. We've missed something here. It didn't used to be like this. Why are mothers feeling so disempowered? Why are we going backwards? We have all of these amazing medical understandings of what's happening, and yet the experience is worse than it's ever been. And so when she looked at that, she decided that we needed 2 changes. One was we need doulas. And so many of your listeners would know what a doula is now. A doula is somebody who is the advocate for the mother in the room. Because what she saw was happening was it was all about the baby and the birth and keeping the baby and the mother and the birth as safe as possible. And, you know, no doubt that is a phenomenal advancement of our time. My first baby got stuck. Who knows if we had been 100 years ago whether either of us would be here. So we're not denying how wonderful those changes are. But in that process, what she found was the mother had become invisible, that she was just the birthing machine in a way. Her voice was gone, her advocacy, and the support and nourishment and the holding of this mother who's going through this massive transformation was missed. Because back in the day, that, you know, as she would look at with anthropological history, is there would have been ceremonies in villages, and there would have been, you know, all of the aunts and the sisters and the mothers around her as she was giving birth. And now suddenly we're in a hospital room where all of that knowledge and confidence and reassurance is gone, and it's looked at through a medical lens. So she said, we need somebody who advocates for the mother, and said that was a doula. And obviously that didn't take off straight away, but it has become part of our understanding of what we need. And then the other thing she said at the time was, I don't think we understand what it is for the process to become a mother. In other words, the minute you pee on a stick or you push a baby out, you don't automatically become a mother. This is a process. It is a time of becoming. And she called this matrescence. But it was really, I don't know if dismissed is the right word, but it certainly wasn't taken seriously. It was allocated to some research documents and wasn't really picked up any further until that amazing teacher at Columbia University that I rushed to New York to meet with when I heard it, kind of excavated it from the research papers and brought it back to life. And through her research in her lab at Columbia University, really came up with what changed it, which is matrescence is like adolescence. Just as we don't assume that our 13-year-old, and I have a couple of teenagers, they don't wake up on their 13th birthday and suddenly they're adults. There is a significant period of huge change. Hormonal, yes. Physical, yes. But also social, psychological, social, economic. You know, they challenge you, they challenge themselves, they question authority, they change the way they look. They're trying to figure out who they're going to be as an adult. And what we need to understand is the same thing happens when we become a parent. We go through this period of physical and hormonal changes, of course, but also, who am I now in this world? What is this world? What's important to me? How do I look? How do I sound? Who do I want to be friends with? What are my relationships for? Do I even really want this career anymore? All of these things that we go through that we have never spoken about and just assume that once you're a mum, you know exactly what you're doing and you're going to love every minute of it and off you go.
It's so
true. So that's where it came from.
It's all so true. I likened it when I discovered this word from Jenna's knowledge and looked into it more myself. It was almost like you go to a doctor because you're not well and you get given a diagnosis. You've got a word, you've got a reason. You understand suddenly what's wrong with you, what's going on. That's how I felt when I discovered and looked into matrescence more. I'm like, why didn't I know this 8.5 years ago? I was that girl that assumed she should know how to do it all. And don't you dare ask for help, Kerry, because that's showing weakness, because everyone around you knows what they're doing. So it's so fascinating, and I'm so grateful that you have come along, Amy, and are helping to spread the word of matrescence.
Thank you. I stand on the shoulders of some pretty phenomenal women with this. And Dr. Aurelie Athen, who is the lead researcher in this, when I worked with her intensively over a few years to sort of develop all of this, she said, words create worlds.
Yes.
And when we don't have a word, we don't know what world we're in. We feel, and you know, my eldest is 16.5, and I still can't talk about this without getting emotional because it is so profoundly isolating and scary and hard when you do not have the words to describe what you're feeling inside.
Really
and
is.
without words, you keep quiet. You think there's something wrong with you. You think everybody else is doing it better. So you put on that mask of motherhood and you just keep on going. If we don't have a word, we don't know where we fit in the world. And that's why this word has changed my life. And so many, it's like, well, my DMs blow up every day of just women saying exactly what you're saying. Why didn't I know this? Yeah, but that's what we're doing. We're changing that.
Spreading the word.
Amy, it's so fascinating also knowing your story, because you were a producer at the ABC, climbing that ladder, working your way, and then you become a mum, and you were changed, and you didn't want to pursue that necessarily anymore. Tell us a little bit about your journey into motherhood.
Yeah, the myth of my family is, myth or fact, I'm not sure. The myth of my family is that when I was born, I came out, looked around the room, apparently at everybody in the room with this look on my face of like, hurry up, we've got things to do, let's get on with it. Like I was just, I was a pretty fierce kid. I knew by a very, very young age that I wanted to be a journalist. I grew up all over Australia. My parents were in the Defence Force. So I grew up listening to the ABC, listening to political reports at 10. Like that's just the world I always wanted to be a part of. And so I was pretty fiercely certain of who I was and what I was here to do, and was unwavering in my sense of self. So, did all the right things, right in inverted commas, that I thought I should do. Went to uni, studied overseas, studied a language because I wanted to be a foreign correspondent. I wanted to be on the front line. Now, I know both of you are South Australian journalists, but one of my absolute heroes as a teenager was Sally Sarah, who was the first foreign correspondent. Yes. I hope this is right, the first female foreign correspondent in South Africa. And she started off at ABC Riverland in Renmark.
Wow.
And that's where I started. And I was like, I am on my way. I am going to be the next Sally Sarah. I know who I'm going to be. Worked my way up the ladder. And then, as we do, fell in love and the body clock ticked. And at 30, found myself married and pregnant. Very easy pregnancy, fell pregnant straight away, was very blessed. In a way, it was like I wasn't prepared because all of those steps were so easy. And then I found myself in the birthing suite and just terrified. It was a very traumatic birth. My daughter was born with some pretty intense physical struggles. So physical, I guess you would call them disabilities, but she has overcome them. But when she was born, she was in a lot of pain and parts of her body didn't sit the way they were meant to or move the way they were meant to. So we had a very traumatic start. And it was the first time in my life, and I don't mean this to sound egotistical, I'm just being honest, but it was the first time in my life that I hadn't got an A+ on something, that I hadn't worked harder than everybody else, that I had followed the rules, I thought, and it didn't work. I'd done the birthing courses. I thought I was ready, and it absolutely floored me how terrified I was. This little baby was so unwell and so unhappy. And I think it was day 3, they finally diagnosed her with her, so she had severe congenital torticollis, which means that one side of her face hadn't, the bones in her face and her neck hadn't developed. So her head was stuck on her shoulder, her foot was stuck up against her shin. Like she basically got stuck inside of me and didn't move and grew like that. So I'm sure you both remember when you're learning how to breastfeed, those beautiful old school midwives walk into the room and grab your enormous nipple and your baby and just shove them on and think that it's meant to be like a jigsaw piece that just fits together.
And we just know what we're meant to do.
Apparently. That's right.
I had
and
no
also,
idea.
They just keep turning this baby's head. We didn't know she couldn't turn her head.
Wow.
So it was horrendous. So by day 3, they finally diagnosed her. And on my medical records with her, it said, I don't know if I was diagnosed with, she was diagnosed with severe breast rejection.
Wow.
By day 3. And by then I was just, I was broken. Yeah.
And I guess can't help but feel like, what have I done? Have I done something wrong?
It was literally written down that my baby had rejected me.
Yeah.
That's how I saw it. It was rejection of me, my breast, the milk that she needs to survive. That's how I saw it in that 3 days postpartum mess. And for everyone who's listening, who's been through a traumatic birth and a traumatic beginning, it's hard to, I just want to acknowledge what that is like, because others may not really understand how you can't put words to what that feels like. It's just such an intense, scary period. And that kind of was the beginning of me feeling like I didn't know who I was and how did I get here. I went through a pretty intense period of wondering maybe I shouldn't have been a mum. Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I'm bad at this. Maybe my body doesn't work the right way. It was pretty horrible for a few months. We had to be in the hospital every day for 6 weeks for her to get physiotherapy. And the physiotherapy was pretty horrible. And then we'd go home and we had to wake her up overnight and move her head and massage her feet and try and get her body to heal, which it did. But by the time she was 4 months, she really turned a corner. But by that stage, I'd been diagnosed with postpartum thyroiditis, which turned into Hashimoto's. And it was like my baby started to finally smile and feed and sleep, and something had changed in me forever. I lost that belief in I can do anything, which was a pretty scary place for me, considering if the myth is true that I came out of the womb saying, come on, I'm here to do something, let's go. It was a very confronting moment in my life. And so being the journalist that I am, I was like, surely somebody else is feeling like this.
Yeah, I can't be the only one.
I'm sure you guys are the same. My answer is somebody must know the answer here. It's always been my answer. Who's researching this? Who can I interview? What articles can I write? It's just always been the way. So I started looking around and nobody was talking about it. So I thought it was me and I thought it was my fault. So I just stayed quiet and kept going.
When did you discover matrescence, and tell us how did that change and I suppose validate your experience, because for me it did.
I didn't find out the word matrescence until 10 years later.
Oh, wow. Okay.
She was 10. So
you sat with that for a while, all of those sort of,
all those thoughts and feelings.
Absolutely. And I still did pursue the questions. So I think Scarlett, my eldest, I think she was 9 months old when my first article was published in a magazine in Australia around birth trauma and how we can support women differently. Like the activist in me kicked in very quickly. It was how I was trying to heal myself. I went back to work quite quickly at the ABC thinking that would make me feel better. And I see this so many times in all the women that I've spoken to and supported since, that we keep waiting for that point or that time where we're going to feel like ourselves again. And that's what's so powerful about this idea of matrescence, is that just like a teenager will never be a child again. And we'll have moments of missing that innocence and that freedom and that time. You can't ever go back. It's always a forward motion. And so often I thought, when I go back to work, I'll feel like Amy again. When I have another baby, but I have a better birth, I'll feel like myself and powerful and who I am again. And so I kept going along that path. Started a blog. The ABC commissioned me to write a blog for the whole of the ABC Australia website. I had a weekly program around motherhood. Like I was doing all the things around it, but I still felt like I describe it this way. It's like I had the answer, but I didn't know what the question was.
Yeah.
It's like I knew there was something, but I still couldn't find exactly what it was. I knew it resonated. I had a very popular blog by that stage. And then we moved to Sydney. And I jokingly say, because the universe knew that I hadn't learnt my lesson yet, I had a surprise third pregnancy. I was producing Adam Spencer's breakfast program, the most popular breakfast program here in Sydney, for the ABC. It was the middle of a federal election. I was 26 weeks pregnant, 5 days a week, getting up at 3:30 in the morning.
It's tough.
And then 2 toddlers at home. My husband at the time was in advertising, so we didn't see each other at all. At all, because he got home at midnight and I woke up at 3:30. And
was a surprise
but I still managed
pregnancy.
That's right. Just a surprise pregnancy. Literally surprise. Like, I know exactly what night he was conceived. It was the only time we had dinner that month. But you know, also just pushing myself in this crazy, ridiculous pace that we, again, what I see so many of us do is that when we don't know why we feel the way we do, or we haven't processed it or understood it, we kind of double down on what we think will work. And that was 100% me, until one day when I was 28 weeks pregnant, I went into early labour with my son in the middle of a federal election.
Wow.
And I remember the day, like I was still wearing high heels in the office because, you know, that's just what you do, and running around. I grabbed a press release off the printer, held onto my belly. I knew I was having a boy and said, come on, buddy, we've got to run, because we were live on air and it was something that was coming through. And as I ran, I was like, oh, that feels weird. And within hours, I was contractions every 5 minutes with this tiny little baby.
It's too early, too soon.
Way too early. And the specialists and the doctors that were all in the room were very clear with me that it was my lifestyle that was causing this. There was no medical reason why I was struggling to keep this baby inside, and told me I needed to go on couch rest or bed rest until I got to the safe point of 36 weeks. I have really little babies. I'm not big myself. So, you know, they were worried that even at 36 weeks, he would be too little. And I have to be honest and say, even then, I really struggled to slow down because, and I think, again, this is why this word has so much healing power, because what I realized in those 10 weeks when I sat on the couch and downloaded my first meditation app and finally thought, okay, Amy, you're going to have to figure this out. You've literally put your baby at risk here because you can't slow down. I say the 2 most important questions I've ever asked is, one is, what happened to me when I became a mum? What happens to us when we become a mother? And the second most important question I've ever asked is, why can't I slow down and be a mum? Why can't I just be okay with this? And in those 10 weeks, that's when that question came up. And it's when I realized that I'd never accepted that I had changed. I never accepted that that career path that I'd set as a 10-year-old in the middle of the outback listening to the ABC wasn't who I was anymore. And I kind of didn't know how to get off that treadmill. I just kept going because I thought that's who I was, and I wasn't anymore. And I was so deeply unhappy and unhealthy, but I didn't know how to say that to the world, because we've grown up in a time where being a mum is not enough. I was brought up as a fierce feminist, and I was told, what are you going to do to change this world? I couldn't just be a mum and step back from this wild career that I've always wanted. And so that's when everything started to change. And that's when I found the word matrescence and finally started on this path.
That last part there, you're talking about you not accepting that you've changed. And it had me thinking, of course you couldn't accept, because the world around you doesn't even accept that you have changed. And, you know, Kerry and I are journalists too. My mum couldn't understand why I would want to not work in radio anymore, and you've worked so hard and it's
your dream.
It's your dream, and it's like, well, it's not my dream anymore. And I think back to after having my first son, I go to my obstetrician's office, the 6 weeks checkup, and she says, serious, straight to my face, have you had sex yet? and I'm still bleeding and I'm just like, what? Oh, well, make sure you do it before 8 weeks because, you know, things can get like, and I was so shocked. It was just like, what do you mean? Like, I'm not thinking about that right now. It's just like, how soon can we bounce you back? How soon can we
That's it.
get you going again? It's just awful, actually.
And the same thing happens when we return to work. I mean, in Australia, we're lucky because we can have 12 months off maybe. In America and different places, it's 6 weeks after your baby is born. You walk back into the office and it's like you've been on a 6-week holiday. They're like, oh, hi, how's it going? Welcome back. There's your desk. Do you remember your login? First meeting's at 10. And you're like leaking from every part. And you're like, what the hell just happened to me?
I would have a breakdown. I would not handle that at all. I don't think I'd even wash my hair at 6 weeks after giving birth.
Well, that's it.
Let alone getting dressed for work.
12 months later, one of my great passions is that I want workplaces to understand matrescence so that when we need to have a re-onboarding process.
Absolutely.
Like you can't just assume you've got the same woman walking back through the front door again. She's not. But we have to do that gently because she doesn't want to be treated with kid gloves and, you know, oh, well, now you're a mum, we need to be careful. But also at the same time, she is completely different and we do need to have that conversation. But what if we looked at it as a superpower? What if we actually looked at it as she has now changed in the most profound way?
Yeah.
Like the neuroscience now is showing us that her brain changes and never goes back. There's this part of her brain that goes from me to we is the best way to describe it. So instead of her being the center of the universe, she is now looking at the world of how are you going to make this safer for my kid? So if you can activate that in the workplace for parents, and interestingly, the science shows that a non-birthing parent's brain changes as much, almost as much, if they can stay home. So with our partners going straight back to work, unfortunately, the brain changes at very minimum. But if they can share the care at the beginning, their brain changes for the better too.
Wow.
So how wild would that be if we actually acknowledge that staying home makes you a more compassionate leader, a better environmentally aware company, all of these things. Yeah, it's amazing what we could be doing differently.
It's really cool. I found your Instagram page, Amy, and it sort of introduced me to a whole other world. You know, my mum lives interstate in New South Wales. I was here with my husband and his family here, but, you know, it's not the same as when it's not your own mum. And so I found some wonderful small businesses and stuff and a really excellent book called The First 40 Days. And reading that and learning about how different cultures honour that early postpartum period, it was like, okay, it's my permission slip that I needed to just be with my baby and learn about each other. And, you know, there are so many wise cultures we can learn from and better that period for mums.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure you probably have him on the list, but the work of Dr. Oscar Serelak is world leading, one of our Australian doctors in this area. And I hope I've got this right, but he says something along the lines of the first 40 days affects the next 40 years of a woman's health. If we don't do this better, it takes so long for her health. I mean, I still have on a daily basis struggles with my thyroid disease and the ongoing effects of how traumatic that was. And that's going to be with me for a lifetime. If we could do this better right from the beginning, like my dream would be that we talk about this with our daughters, and, you know, as part of period preparation, matrescence preparation, menopause preparation, we need to be doing all of this differently. But if we can nourish and nurture that transition, matrescence doesn't end. It's always going to be a part of us growing into the next stage of motherhood. But in particular, that postpartum period, the flow-on effect is profound to not only us, obviously, but our relationships, our kids, our workplaces, our culture, our society, all of it.
And no one's more... what's the word I'm looking for? a mum can smash out a whole lot more work in a shorter period of time than anybody else that I know. So you're right, it is a superpower.
It is a superpower. And also, if she's going to leave her baby screaming at daycare and pay for that,
which that was me,
you better make that work worthwhile.
Yeah.
You better make her feel like she's there for a reason, or that she has to, treat her with the utmost admiration for what she's doing right now, and you will get the best out of her. As part of my studies through all of this, I think you're both going to love this. I heard this. There were so many times during my study with Dr. Athen where I was like, oh my God, why don't we talk about this? But there's a wonderful theory called matricentric feminism. And what it is it acknowledges that feminism is phenomenal and is important. And I'm a diehard feminist and I'm so grateful for all of the women and people before us. But there is a very strong acknowledgement now that in our push for feminism and equality, motherhood was forgotten.
Oh, yes. This is what I've been saying to my mum.
It was ignored. It was forgotten. And perhaps that's what it needed to be at the time.
Yeah.
But we are now in the season of matricentric feminism, meaning you cannot talk about a woman in the workplace without acknowledging the role of mothers. The reason why we have all of these phenomenal opportunities for women to be leaders and they still aren't is because we don't acknowledge what they do outside of work to be able to be there. And that's really exciting for me that we're now at a time where that's starting to be acknowledged. So, yeah, motherhood is what feminism forgot. And we now need a matricentric feminism, or in other parts of the conversation, it's called care feminism. Because it isn't just about being a mother. You might also be looking after your parents, your partner, your animal, your friend, whatever it is, that we can't treat people in the workplace like these robots that don't have a life outside. COVID taught us that. And if you do, they'll leave. And that's why we can't see women in these high-powered positions anymore.
It's just so true that you cannot talk about a woman in the workplace without acknowledging the role of mothers.
We're in the midst of a skills shortage and unemployment is also at an all-time low, Kez. And I wonder if businesses realise the talent and the opportunity with mums.
Well, the team at Harrison Macmillan know all about this, and they can help your business look beyond what's on paper and recruit the best people for your workplace.
They're a values-led recruitment agency supporting over 500 clients all over Australia to find and retain exceptional talent.
They're also committed to tailoring solutions to address your unique staffing challenges, and maybe that looks a little different to what you're used to, but they know the mums have skills.
Get in touch with the team at Harrison Macmillan and see for yourself why they're the best in recruitment. Visit harrisonmacmillan.com.au.
I remember when I was returning to work, I was told that I could do some what they labelled keeping in touch shifts.
Oh, yes.
I couldn't do very many.
How did that make you feel? Interesting.
Yeah, just keep in touch. Just to refresh your memory on how to do this job. The hard thing, I remember being given a Saturday shift and I was the only person in the building. It was just me. That's not keeping in touch. That's not what my job normally is. I was normally there Monday to Friday with other people around and someone else in the newsroom with me. And I was given a Saturday morning breakfast shift. It was the most bizarre feeling. And
when you're already feeling isolated.
Yes, so isolated. Yeah. And I walked out of that shift thinking, I don't know if I've never had an issue with meeting those hourly deadlines, half-hourly deadlines. That day, I just remember being so frantically, have I forgotten something? What else do I have to? And there was no one there to check off with and just clarify, am I doing this right? How do I even put this desk to air? I don't remember. Yeah. There was no one there.
God, that brings back PTSD memories.
My apologies.
No, I remember that.
It was terrifying.
But it's so true.
And I do remember saying to my news director, the next keeping in touch shift I do, can it please be during the week?
Yeah, I need someone to help me.
Yeah. It was intense. I had forgotten about it. I'd obviously buried it until our chat. And I was like, oh, yeah, I remember this.
Yeah, I think I've buried some of those memories too. I had a little bit of a PTSD memory of those. Like, I don't even remember how to put us to wear.
Yeah, the panic. I'm feeling all sweaty now as we talk about it.
I didn't return to radio work though, but I still sometimes wake up and I've had a dream that my bulletin's going to air, my news bulletin's going to air in 30 seconds and I haven't got anything written, and it still sits with you, doesn't it?
It does.
Oh, it does.
The top of the hour pips and all of that stuff, it's just like my nightmare.
What has it done to you?
It really is.
And it was actually, I think that's also something that we don't talk very much about, is the grieving of who we used to be and the capacity we used to have. Like, we've just talked about how amazing our brains are post being a mother and all of the benefits and everything. But there's also things that we can't do, we don't want to do, we're not willing to do anymore. And that was also part of what I had to go through. And I've seen this with so many of the mums that I've spoken to over the years, that there has to be this acknowledgement of, I'm just not willing to put myself into that position anymore. And that's a very real and conscious decision, but also that kind of sucks because I did spend a long time building that career, whether it's journalism or working in a bank or in a classroom or whatever you're doing. Part of the matrescence experience is grieving who you were and acknowledging that that time in your life has gone and changed, and that's okay. And then getting super excited about who you want to be. But, you know, I still have moments of, I mean, I don't want to ever be back in those environments again. I remember, you know, I did have to go back to the ABC after my son was born for a little while I built out this new career just financially. And I remember having 3 kids in the bath. I used to call it Kabbaz soup because my husband's surname's Kabbaz. And I'd be still producing breakfast radio and I'd be on my phone trying to get the 3 kids to wash themselves, and on Twitter messaging the Prime Minister's press secretary because I had to be, you know, it's just a wild concept that I thought that that was possible now. But I think so much of this acceptance of how motherhood changes us goes back to that feminist argument that we had before, which is you can't let motherhood be in the center of your life. It can't be the thing that defines you. And so we have this inner split, this inner battle of, I can't just be okay with just being a mum, but at the same time, I can't do this at this pace, at this level anymore. I literally will break if I try and keep up with this. And for so many of us, it comes to that moment in our health or our marriage or something where we realize, this promise of me having it all is just not worth it anymore. And that's a hard thing for us to accept.
Do you think that's why, you know, obviously there's the people who return to work and the people who, you know, stay home for a little bit longer maybe. Do you think that's why there's such a conflict between the two groups? Because neither of us are really sure if we're making the best choice. You know, there's always a sacrifice. I stayed home, Kerry went back, and we both look at each other in the face and say, you did what was right for you.
Absolutely.
But there's still that bit of you that's like, oh.
Yeah, there's an internalized patriarchy, if we want to get technical about it. It's this internalized ladder competition. We do it to our kids in the school system. We constantly, where are you on this, you know, competition of life? And I think that that's really sad that that's what we do. And I think the fact is that because so many of us aren't, I was going to say so many of us aren't honest, but that's not true because we want to be honest. We just feel like we can't, it's not safe for us to be honest. I think we struggle, especially as women, to not only share our darkest feelings, but also our proudest moments. I've seen this again so many times. It's like a woman will hold back how amazing her birth is because she's worried that the person sitting next to her had a terrible one and she's bragging. So we constantly, it's called the mask of motherhood. We just constantly always worrying about what somebody else will think about our choices, our decisions, our experiences. And the only way we're ever going to change that is with conversations like this. And I think, I know I sound like a stuck record, but that's the gift of matrescence, is that it's finally given us this word, this platform, and hopefully we will then build monuments and at universities for it. So we can finally say, hey, this is the totally unique, nuanced experience of becoming a mother that all of us have completely differently, but there's one unifying factor, which is no matter where you are in the world, and I have mama rising coaches all over the world now, no matter where you are in the world, just like no matter where you are in the world, you will go through adolescence, you will go through this experience. So let's all just sit down and start talking about it.
How do we, everyone knows what adolescence is. It's just part of the vernacular. How do we do that same thing with matrescence? Not enough people know about it.
No, I think we should be really proud that Australia is actually the world leading place for matrescence conversations right now.
Stop it. That surprises me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Go us.
This is you, Amy. It's all you, girl.
There's a couple of us here in Australia, Dr. Sophie Brock, totally get her on your podcast as well.
Yes.
Amazing.
There's a few really amazing leaders in this space. Also, I don't know why, I think with their perfect size, it's like the word is spreading faster because we're not a massive country like America. I don't know why it's working here. I literally are having a conversation with someone in America last week saying, what is it about Australia that you guys seem to be getting this? And the other place in the world is Ireland.
Wow.
So out the two little places who are like changing this. I think it's important for us to remember that there was a period not that long ago, maybe 100 or so years ago, where nobody knew adolescence either.
That's very true.
There was a true belief that children went mad on the way to adulthood.
Which is also not untrue.
That's right, exactly. But now we can understand why.
Exactly right.
So we need that exactly in the same way we need what we need to do for matrescence. We need
acceptance.
That you can't even study motherhood studies in university in Australia. You can do gender studies. There is no motherhood studies.
Oh.
There isn't a specific matrescence. Most OBGYNs wouldn't know what matrescence is. So we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
I think in Australia, we're moving faster than most. But what we need is research. Because at the moment, not only am I really passionate about talking to mums directly and training others to do the same, but I really want us in boardrooms and corporations and governments talking about this. And it's starting to happen. We've one of the amazing women in Adelaide actually has just finished her master's in matrescence-based public policy, who trained with me. So there's some really exciting things. We've got a couple of our coaches in huge global organizations like LinkedIn, bringing in matrescence awareness for parents. So there's big changes happening. But I think the only way we're going to make a difference is we need data. So at the moment, we need to prove that if a woman understands what matrescence is before she has a baby, it will change the impact on the other side. And so we need that. And the second thing we need is money for that. Is we need people in there to support us and to get it out there. And then we'll have the university research and the stats, and then the businesses will listen and policies will change.
It'll be a journey, but gosh, it'll be worthwhile, won't it? When we get to that point, it will be so worthwhile.
But I was thinking too, because the men need to hear it, our partners need to appreciate this process of becoming a mother and recognize that my wife's going to be different and she's going to be better and amazing and it's going to be awesome. And of course, partnerships look different for everyone, but I'm just acknowledging that the men need to get this too, right?
100%. And again, on my podcast, I've done a couple of interviews around, is there something called patrescence? So I get asked that a lot, is there something that happens to a man's sense of identity? Well, of course, that becoming a father changes how you think about the world, what you focus on, but they don't have the physical, hormonal and brain changes that the birthing parent does. Like I said before, the more they're involved, the more physical changes they experience. But in our day and age, they're lucky if they can stay home for the first 2 weeks.
That's right.
So absolutely, there is a different way of supporting dads in the workplace and the non-birthing parents. But I was at a conference in Tasmania a couple of months ago by the phenomenal leader of, I'm trying to think of what her name is, Steph, who runs the Motherland Conference. It's a huge organisation for supporting regional and rural mothers on the land because they're so isolated after they have a baby. And Steph was voted as the Tasmanian Australian of the Year for her work with rural and regional mothers. And I was speaking at the conference a few months ago and I was in the toilets, where all great conversations with women happen.
Absolutely.
And this beautiful mama comes up to me and bursts into tears and says, "Oh my God, are you Amy?" And I'm like, "Oh, yes."
What have I done?
I know. She said, "Your book saved my marriage."
Wow.
And I burst into tears because she's like, to be able to finally explain to my husband what I had been going through and why I was struggling so much in a way that he could also understand it because he gets what adolescence is and he can put that into perspective. She said, the only reason I'm still on my family's farm with him and my kids is because of the word matrescence. I could finally get him to understand what I'd been going through. And so, the potential for this is enormous. If we could have these conversations instead of worrying about what pram we're buying, instead having real conversations between parents to be about how you think it might change you, and put this vocabulary in place for them, it'll make a huge difference.
Gosh, it will.
Mm.
It really will. Whatever I can do, I'm going to shout it.
Get a tattooed on your forehead, Kerry.
Walk around with a banner.
That's it. Well, we call ourselves matrescence activists for a reason because we need a revolution and a revolution needs an army. So we're like the matrescence army, all of us now.
Can we have a uniform?
Yeah.
Should we?
Just a T-shirt. Just give me a T-shirt.
Or like a bumper sticker for the car or something.
Yes. That's
Google it.
I know you. You're one of me.
Amy, just listening to you talk, it's just like, yes, over and over and over again.
Have you been inside my head, Amy? You get it.
It's really impactful.
Oh, thank you.
I think also a lot of that emotional baggage that comes up when you become a mum and, for want of a better phrase, working on your own shit and all of that stuff that you don't want to pass on to your kids when you become a mum. And, I didn't think I had things to necessarily work through, but then I became a mum and I was like, oh, whoa, don't want to. Is that all part of matrescence too, Amy?
Yeah, it really is. And the way that I like to think of it is that I feel like that's the ultimate goal or the ultimate job of matrescence is to get us, if we're supported through it. I think if, sorry to bring up the adolescence reference again, but if you are going through adolescence, not knowing what it is and having no support and nobody around you saying it's okay, this is part of the process and what do you need, then you're going to have a pretty horrible time and probably land in adulthood not as clear as you should be.
Yeah.
And if we can do the same thing for mothers, then they absolutely will look at their generational stories. They'll look at how they were parented, how they want to do the same, how they want to do it differently. I think it's part of the actual role of this transition is to bring us to the edge of all of the things, all the parts of ourselves. I mean, that's what parenthood does, right? Mm-hmm. It smacks you right in the face with all of your bad bits and all of your fears and all of your shadows. And if we could make that open and clear and supported, then, it would be amazing. For me, that's what kind of pushed me to do this first. I didn't know I'd end up creating a whole career out of it. Mostly I started downloading that meditation app and signing up for my own therapy and coach and inner work, because I could see for myself what I was doing. Like, I didn't want to do this to my unborn child, obviously, but also just not continue this pattern of ignoring my body and pushing through and having this mask on. So I think whether you're going to walk away from your career and become a matrescence activist and start a podcast like you guys, or whether you're just going to do this in your own small way, that's the greatest gift of this, is can we acknowledge that this is a time in our life where we're meant to kind of hit pause a little bit and ask ourselves, who am I now? Who do I want to be? What do I need to let go of? What stories, beliefs, ambitions did I hang on to for too long? And kind of realign ourselves a little before we hit go again, because parenting never lets us stop. So we have to be really aware of this is a self-pause until usually our health makes us pause. And that's what happens so often with women, is that because we don't hit pause and ask ourselves these questions, our body makes us. But if we can remember that and do it for ourselves, then hopefully we stop that burnout.
And also for all mums to understand that it is actually unrealistic to 7 hours after you give birth be standing on the steps of a hospital with your third baby in your arms.
Looking
like
at
Kate
you,
Middleton.
Kate Middleton.
I remember that, April 2018, and she's got her third baby 7 hours postpartum. 6 weeks before that, I'd had my second baby, and I can tell you 7 hours postpartum, I was not even considering putting hair and makeup together and high heels. It's such an unrealistic image of motherhood.
Yeah, and it makes me angry because,
100%.
you know, and this isn't a direct attack at her at all, because she is part of the system that she has to continue to be. And I think in her own way, she is making changes. But it is so insidious, this pressure. It is right from birth about who we are, what we need to look at and what our role is. And it is really scary to be trying to change that in your own world. You know, I hear from mums every day all over the world who are like, but you don't understand. My family expects me to be like this. My husband wouldn't agree if I spoke up like that. I don't know how to stand up for myself. I don't know how to walk away from this job. I don't know how to do it any differently. We have a mountain ahead of us. But again, the only way to do this is to do it together. All great change in our history has come from a groundswell of people who are most affected. It's not going to come from the top. It is absolutely not. It is going to be the mothers standing shoulder to shoulder saying, I refuse to do this way again, and I won't let my daughters do it. That's how it'll change.
Oh, goosebumps.
Yeah,
so
I know, me too.
Now we really need to take this to
we need a theme
how
song.
people can, well, yes, we need that. Maybe we can rejig the Charlie's Angels theme song or something.
Charlie's Angels.
Between
Come
the three
on.
of us. No, I was going to say your wonderful programs. So tell us a little bit about those and how, if anyone's listening, they may want to check you out and
Find out more.
You've got stuff for mums. You've also got programs for people that work in this space who want to better their teachings. That's huge.
Yes. So for a long time, I did coach and run programs directly to mums. And then obviously the more of the activist in me, the more I realized, well, I'm not going to be able to do this on my own. So in 2020, after working with Dr. Athen at Columbia, developed a coaching program, a coaching training that trains, we've only ever had women in there so far, happy to have men, but trains people over 6 months about matrescence and the research and the matricentric feminism and all of that, plus how to actually support a woman through it, through using coaching skills and values exercises. So we now have, like I said, we have women using that training in huge organisations, in HR roles. We also have women do it one-on-one in group programs. I don't work directly with mums like that anymore. because it's now time for them all to do that. But if anybody listening wants to work with one of our amazing mummerizing coaches, and we're in 17 different countries now, you can go to mummerizing.net, and on there search for someone to support you, whether it's through miscarriage. We have miscarriage specialists. We have a matrescence coach who works with adoptive mothers. We have so many different specialties. So that's for the mums. They can go onto mummerizing.net and work with one of our coaches, but you can also read my book and listen to my podcast. Or for anyone who wants to join the army and get out there. Get
a bumper sticker.
That's it. Sign up and join the theme song, sing with us. Whether you want to just do this in your community, we have beautiful mums who do this training and just run new types of mothers groups. We have one woman here in New South Wales who's just received government funding through her local council. Instead of the old school mothers groups that meet for 6 weeks and talk about the baby, she's got funding to run mothers groups using mummerizing, the 6 weeks of to
that
talk
is
about
so
matrescence
good.
and identity.
Good on her.
Yeah, you wouldn't believe, well, you would, because this is what you guys are doing.
We've lived it.
What happens to a woman when she realizes what she's just been through and gets activated to make sure that no other woman is that isolated ever again? Like, these women are powerhouses. It's so awesome. So that mummerizing training we run twice a year, September and March. And so you can jump on and see all the details there.
Love that. That's actually what we've been saying about our podcast. It's the mothers group you wish you had, because
yes,
you know, I can remember sitting in that mothers group and actually staying very quiet because I realised I was doing things very differently to
not
how
one of these girls.
Everybody else was doing. You know, I breastfed on demand. We co-slept with our baby. Not saying that that's the way everybody needs to do it, but I just felt lost and not, seen. So it's really lovely to, like you say, find some sort of safe space so mums can just share their own experience without judgment, without fear, and just be able to say, awesome, look at you doing that and look at me doing it my way, and we're all getting there in our own way.
And it blows my mind that we expect these brand new mums who are probably still, again, leaking from orifices that they're not aware of, they have never leaked from before. Put them in a room, and the first thing we do is go around the story and tell your birth story. Yes. Go around the circle, and tell your birth story. Ugh. That is so not trauma-informed. That is so dangerous. It is so not what is needed in that beautiful, sensitive, vulnerable time of her life.
Yeah.
She needs a space where she is held and she is supported and she is told about what she's experiencing, rather than tell the group how you're handling this. No, it makes me angry, as you can tell. It's so not the right way that we should be doing this. And again, everyone's done the best they can up until now, but we do know differently now, and it's time to do differently.
I love it.
We would love to know from you one word to describe the woman that you were before motherhood and the woman you are now.
Oh, that's good. Oh, that makes me emotional. That is such a powerful thing to think about. I'm surprised at what the answer was that popped into my head when you first asked who I was before. The word that came to mind was scared. I don't know. I think I was desperately, I know you only wanted one word. Is it okay if I explain the word?
No, please, yeah.
I realize now how scared I actually was, and that's why I was always trying to work harder and prove who I was. I didn't feel I didn't know who, So when I think about that beautiful version of myself, I'm like, oh, you were actually pretty scared. And me now, my daughter's now 16, 14 and 10. So today's word would be patient.
Wow, though. I love that.
Yeah. Patient with myself, with my kids, with life. I kind of Yeah.
And they
I'm
go
a lot
hand in
more-
hand a bit, scared and
They
patient.
do, don't they?
There's a
Yeah.
real
I don't
tying
know
in.
who I am all the time anymore either, but I'm okay with that.
But you're
I'm
okay with
patient
that,
myself.
yes.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Amy, will you come on
What a
again?
beautiful question. Oh, always.
We would love to have you
Yeah.
back. I'm sure
Whenever.
we can hash this out for many more hours to come. But thank you so, so much for joining us. You can learn more about Amy's books and her programs via her website. All the information and the links will be in the show notes. Amy, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our first guest, I just think that was so powerful. Thank you.
Thank you. And what an honor to be your first guest. And thank you for bringing these conversations. This is what we need.
Thank you so much for joining us on How Motherhood Changed Me. We'd love you to be part of the conversation by connecting with us on social media. And if you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review and subscribe.